Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz by Dorothy L. No Londoner can ever resist the attraction of a street crowd. Mr. Montague Egg, driving up Kingsway and observing a group of people staring into the branches of one of the slender plane trees which embellished that thoroughfare, drew up to see what all the excitement was about. "Poor puss!" cried the bystanders, snapping encouraging fingers. "Poor pussy then, kitty, 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 come on! Look, baby, that pretty pussy. Fetch her a bit of cat's meat. She'll come down when she's tired of it. Jack a stone at her. Now then, what's all this about?" The slender, shabby child who stood so forlornly holding the empty basket appealed to the policeman. "Oh, do please send these people away. How can he come down with everyone shouting at him? He's frightened, poor darling." From among the swaying branches a pair of amber eyes gleamed wrathfully down. The policeman scratched his head. "A bit of a job, ain't it, missy? However did he come to get up there?" "The fastening came undone, and he jumped out of the basket just as we were getting off the bus. Oh, please do something." Mr. Montague Egg, casting his eye over the crowd, perceived on its outskirts a window cleaner with his ladders upon a truck. He hailed him. "Fetch that ladder along, sonny, and we'll soon get him down, if you'll allow me to try, miss. If we leave him to himself, he'll probably stick up there for ages." It's hard to reassure, persuade or charm the customer who once has felt alarm. "Carefully now, that's the ticket." "Oh, thank you so much. Oh, do be gentle with him. He does hate being handled." "That's all right, miss. Don't you worry. Always a gentleman, Monty Egg. Kind about the house, clean with children. Up she goes." And Mr. Egg, clapping his smart trilby upon his head and uttering crooning noises, ascended into the leafage. A loud explosion of spitting sounds and a small shower of twigs floated down to the spectators. And presently Mr. Egg followed, rather awkwardly, clutching a reluctant bunch of ginger fir. The girl held out the basket, and the 4 furiously kicking legs were somehow bundled in. A tradesman's lad produced a piece of string, the lid secured, the window cleaner rewarded and removed his ladder, and the crowd dispersed. Mr. Egg, winding his pocket handkerchief around a lacerated wrist, picked the scattered leaves out of his collar and straightened his tie. "Oh, he's scratched you dreadfully," lamented the girl, her blue eyes large and tragic. "Not at all," replied Mr. Egg. "Very happy to have been of assistance, I'm sure. Can I have the pleasure of driving you anywhere? It'll be pleasanter for him than a bus. And if we pull up the windows, he can't jump out, even if he does get the basket open again." The girl protested, but Mr. Egg firmly bustled her into his little saloon and inquired where she wanted to go. "It's this address," said the girl, pulling a newspaper cutting out of her worn handbag. "Somewhere in Soho, isn't it?" Mr. Egg, with some surprise, read the advertisement. "Wanted, hard-working, capable cat, either sex, to keep down mice in pleasant villa residence and be companion to middle-aged couple. 10 shillings and good home to suitable applicant. Apply personally to Mr. John Doe, La Cigale, Beer and Heureuse, 5th Street, West, on Tuesday between 11 and 1 o'clock. "That's a funny set-out," said Mr. Egg, frowning. "Oh, do you think there's something wrong with it? Is it just a joke?" "Well," said Mr. Egg, "I can't quite see why anybody wants to pay 10 bob for an ordinary cat, can you? I mean, they usually come gratis, and FOB from somebody who doesn't like drowning kittens. I don't quite believe in Mr. John Doe. He sounds like what they call a legal fiction." "Oh dear," cried the girl with tears in her blue eyes. I did so hope it would be all right. You see, we're so dreadfully hard up with father out of work, and Maggie, that's my stepmother, says she won't keep Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz any longer because he scratches the table legs and eats as much as a Christian, bless him, though he doesn't really. Only a little milk and a bit of cat's meat. And he's a beautiful mouser, only there aren't many mice where we live. And I thought, if I could get him a good home and 10 shillings for some new boots for Dad, he needs them so badly. Oh, well, cheer up, said Mr. Egg. Perhaps they're willing to pay for a full-grown certified mouser. Or, tell you what, it may be one of those cinema stunts. Look, we'll go and see anyhow. Only I think you'd better let me come with you and interview Mr. Doe. I'm quite respectable, he added hastily. Here's my card. Montague Egg, travelling representative of Plummet and Rose, Wine and Spirits, Piccadilly. Interviewing customers, my long suit. The salesman's job is to get the trade. Don't leave the house till the deal is made. That's Monty's motto. Oh, my name's Jean Maitland. Dad's in the commercial line himself. Well, at least he was till he got bronchitis last winter. And now he isn't strong enough to go on the road. Oh, bad luck, said Monty sympathetically, as he turned down High Holborn. He liked this child of 16 or so, and registered a vow that something should be done about it. It seemed as though there were other people who thought 10 shillings good payment for a cat. The pavement before the grubby little Soho restaurant was thick with cat owners, some carrying baskets, some clutching their animals in their arms, and the air resounded with the mournful cries of the prisoners. Oh, some competition, said Monty. Well, anyhow, the post doesn't seem to be filled yet. Hang on to me, we'll try what we can do. They waited for some time. It seemed that the applicants were being passed out through a back entrance, for though many went in, none returned. Eventually they secured a place in the queue going up a dingy staircase, and, after a further eternity, found themselves facing a dark and discouraging door. Presently this was opened by a stout and pursy-faced man with very sharp little eyes who said briskly, "Next, please," and they walked in. Mr. John Doe?" said Monty. "Yes, brought your cat? Oh, the young lady's cat, I see. Sit down, please. Name and address, miss." The girl gave an address south of the Thames, and the man made a note of it. In case," he explained, "the chosen candidate should prove unsuitable, and I might want to write to you again. Now, let us see the cat." The basket was opened, and a ginger head emerged resentfully. "Oh, yes, fine specimen. Poor pussy, then. He doesn't seem very friendly." "He's frightened by the journey. But he's a darling when he once knows you, and a splendid mouser, and so clean." Yes, that's important. Must have him clean. And he must work for his living, you know." "Oh, he will. He can tackle rats or anything. We call him Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz because he makes haste to the spoil. But he answers to mash, don't you, darling?" "I see. Well, he seems to be in good condition. No fleas, no diseases? My wife is very particular." "Oh, no, he's a splendid healthy cat. Fleas, indeed." "Well, no offence, but I must be particular, because she will make a great pet of him. I don't care much for his colour, though. 10 shillings is a high price to pay for a ginger one. I don't know whether—" Come, said Monty. "Nothing was said in your advertisement about colour. This lady's come a long way to bring you the cat, and you can't expect her to take less than she's offered. You'll never get a better cat than this. Everyone knows the ginger ones are the best mousers. They've got more go in them. And look at his handsome white shirt front. It shows you how beautifully clean he is. And think of the advantage. You can see him. You and your good lady won't go tripping over him in a dark corner, same as you do with these black and tabby ones. Well, as a matter of fact, we ought to charge you more for a handsome colour such as this." They're much rarer and more high class than an ordinary cat. There's something in that, admitted Mr. Doe. Well, look here, Miss Maitland. Supposing you bring what you said, out to our place this evening, and if my wife likes him, we'll keep him. Here's the address, and you must come at 6 precisely, please, as we shall be going out later. Monty looked at the address, which was at the northern extremity of the Edgware Morden Tube. It's a very long way to come on the chance, he said resolutely. You'll have to pay Miss Maitland's expenses. Oh, certainly, said Mr. Doe. That's only fair. Here's £0.50. You can return me the change this evening. Very well, thank you. Your cat will have a really happy home if he comes to us. Put him back in his basket now. Other way out, please. Mind the step. Good morning. And Mr. Egg and his new friend, stumbling down an excessively confined and stuffy back staircase into a malodorous by-street, looked at one another. You seem rather an abrupt sort of person, said Miss Maitland. I do hope he'll be kind to Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz. And you were marvellous about the gingeriness. I thought he was going to be stuffy about that. My angel Mash, how anybody could object to his beautiful colour. Said Mr. Egg. Well, Mr. Doe may be okay, but I'll believe in his 10 shillings when I see it. And in any case, you're not going to his house alone. I'll call for you in the car at 5 o'clock. But Mr. Egg, I can't allow you. Besides, you've taken £0.50 off him for my fare. Ah, that's only business, said Mr. Egg. 5 o'clock sharp, I shall be there. Well, come at 4 and let us give you a cup of tea anyway. That's the least we can do. Pleased, I'm sure, said Mr. Egg. The house, occupied by Mr. John Doe, was a new detached villa, standing solitary at the extreme end of a new and unmade suburban road. It was Mrs. Doe who answered the bell, a small, frightened-looking woman with watery eyes, and the nervous habit of plucking at her pale lips with her fingers. Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz was released from his basket in the sitting-room, where Mr. Doe was reclining in an armchair reading the evening paper. The cat sniffed suspiciously at him, but softened to Mrs. Doe's timid advances so far as to allow his ears to be tickled. Well, my dear, said Mr. Doe, will he do? You don't object to the colour, eh? Oh no, he's a beautiful cat. I like him very much. Right, then we'll take him. Here you are, Miss Maitland, 10 shillings. Please sign the receipt. Thanks. Never mind about the change from the £0.50. There you are, my dear. You've got your cat, and I hope we shall see no more of those mice. Now, he glanced at his watch. I'm afraid you must say goodbye to your pet quickly, Miss Maitland. We've got to get off. He'll be quite safe with us. Monty strolled out with gentlemanly reticence into the hall while the last words were said. It was, no doubt, the same gentlemanly feeling which led him to move away from the sitting-room door towards the back part of the house. But he'd only waited a very few minutes when Jean Maitland came out, sniffing valiantly into a small handkerchief, and followed by Mrs. Doe. You're fond of your cat, aren't you, my dear? I do hope you don't feel too... There, Flossie, said her husband, appearing suddenly at her shoulders. Miss Maitland knows he'll be well looked after. He showed them out and shut the door quickly upon them. If you don't feel happy about it, said Mr. Egg uneasily, we'll have him back in 2 twos. No, it's all right, said Jean. If you don't mind, let's get in at once and drive away rather fast. As they lurched over the uneven road, Mr. Egg saw a lad coming down it. In one hand he carried a basket. He was whistling loudly. "Oh, look," said Monty, "one of our hated rivals. Well, we've got in ahead of him anyhow. The salesman first upon the field gets the bargain signed and sealed. Damn it," he added to himself as he pressed the accelerator. "I hope it is okay. I wonder." Although Mr. Egg had worked energetically to get Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz settled in the world, he wasn't easy in his mind. The matter preyed upon his spirits to such an extent that, finding himself back in London on the following Saturday week, he made an expedition south of the Thames to make inquiries. And when the Maitlands' door was opened by Jean, there, by her side, arching his back and brandishing his tail, was Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz. "Yes," said the girl. "He found his way back, the clever darling, just a week ago today. He was dreadfully thin and draggled. How he did it, I can't imagine. But we simply couldn't send him away again, could we, Maggie?" "No," said Mrs. Maitland. "I don't like the cat and never did, but there, I suppose even cats have their feelings. But it's an awkward thing about the money." "Oh yes," said Jean. "You see, when he got back and we decided to keep him, I wrote to Mr. Doe and explained and sent him a postal order for the 10 shillings. And this morning the letter came back from the post office marked 'Not known.' So we don't know what to do about it." "I never did believe in Mr. John Doe," said Monty. "If you ask me, Miss Maitland, he was no good and I shouldn't bother any more about him." But the girl was not satisfied. And presently the obliging Mr. Egg found himself driving out northwards in search of the mysterious Mr. Doe, carrying the postal order with him. The door of the villa was opened by a neatly dressed elderly woman whom he'd never seen before. Mr. Egg inquired for Mr. John Doe. "Oh, he doesn't live here. Never heard of him." Monty explained that he wanted the gentleman who'd purchased the cat. "Cat?" said the woman, and her face changed. "Step inside, will you? George," she called to somebody inside the house. "Here's a gentleman called about a cat. Perhaps you'd like to—" The rest of the sentence was whispered into the ear of a man who emerged from the sitting room, and who appeared to be, and was in fact, her husband. George looked Mr. Egg carefully up and down. "Well, I don't know anybody here called Doe," said he. "But if it's the late tenant you're wanting, they've left. Packed and went off in a hurry, day after the old gentleman was buried. I'm the caretaker for the landlord. And if you've missed a cat, perhaps you'd like to come and have a look out here." He led the way through the house and out at the back door into the garden. In the middle of one of the flower beds was a large hole, like an irregularly shaped and shallow grave. A spade stood upright in the mould, and laid in 2 lugubrious rows upon the lawn were the corpses of some very dead cats. At a hasty estimate, Mr. Egg reckoned there must be close on 50 of them. "Well, if any of these is yours," said George, "you're welcome to it. It ain't what you might call in good condition." "Oh, good Lord," said Mr. Egg, appalled, and thought with pleasure of Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz, tail erect, welcoming him on the Maitland's threshold. "Come back and tell me about this. It's unbelievable." It turned out that the name of the late tenants had been Proctor. The family consisted of an old Mr. Proctor, an invalid, to whom the house belonged, and his married nephew and the nephew's wife. Well, they didn't have no servants sleeping in. Old Mrs. Crabbe used to do for them, coming in daily, and she always told me that the old gentleman couldn't abide cats. They made him ill like. I've known folks like that before. And of course they had to be careful, him being so frail and his heart so bad he might have popped off any minute. What it seemed to us when I found all them cats buried were like was How maybe young Proctor had killed them to prevent the old gentleman seeing them and getting a shock. But the queer thing is, all of them cats looked to have been killed about the same time, and not so long ago neither. Mr. Egg remembered the advertisement, and the false name, and the applicants passed out by a different door so that none of them could possibly tell how many cats had been bought and paid for. And he remembered also the careful injunction to bring the cat at 6 o'clock precisely, and the whistling lad with the basket who'd appeared on the scene about a quarter of an hour after them. He remembered another thing, a faint mewling noise that had struck upon his ear as he stood in the hall while Jean was saying goodbye to Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz, and the worried look on Mrs. Proctor's face when she'd asked if Jean was fond of her pet. It looked as though Mr. Proctor Jr. had been collecting cats for a rather sinister purpose, collecting them from every quarter of London, from quarters as far apart as possible, or why so much care to take down names and addresses? "What did the old gentleman die of?" he asked. "Well," said Mrs. George, "it was just heart failure, or so the doctor said. Last Tuesday week he passed away in the night, poor soul. And Mrs. Crabb that laid him out said he had a dreadful look of horror on his poor face. But the doctor said that wasn't anything out of the way, not with his disease. What the doctor didn't see, being too busy to come round, was them terrible scratches on his face and arms. Must have regularly clawed himself in his agony. Oh dear, oh dear. But there, anybody knew he might go off at any time, like blowing out a candle." I know that, Sally," said her husband. "But what about them scratches on the bedroom door? Don't really tell me he did that too. Or if he did, why didn't somebody hear him and come along to help? It's all very well for Mr. Timms, that's the landlord, to say as tramps must have got into the house after the Proctors left and put us in here to look after the place, but why should tramps go for to do a useless bit of damage like that? A heartless lot, them Proctors, that's what I say," said Mrs. George. "They're snoring away most likely and leaving their uncle to die by himself. And wasn't the lawyer upset about it neither, coming along in the morning to make the old gentleman's will and him passed away so sudden. And seeing they came in for all his money after all, you'd think they might have given him a better funeral. Mean, I call it. Not a flower hardly. Only 1/2 guinea wreath. And no oak, only elm and a shabby lot of handles. Such trash, you'd think they'd be ashamed." Mr. Egg was silent. He was not a man of strong imagination, but he saw a very horrible picture in his mind. He saw an old, sick man asleep, and hands that quietly opened the bedroom door and dragged in, one after another, sacks that moved and squirmed and mewed. He saw the sacks left open on the floor and the door being softly shut and locked on the outside. And then, in the dim glow of the nightlight, he saw shadowy shapes that leapt and flitted about the room, black and tabby and ginger, up and down, prowling on noiseless feet, thudding on velvet paws from tables and chairs. And then, plump up on the bed, a great ginger cat with amber eyes, and the sleeper waking with a cry, and after that a nightmare of terror and disgust behind the locked and remorseless door, a very old, sick man stumbling and gasping for breath, striking out at the shadowy horrors that pursued and fled him, and the last tearing pain at the heart when merciful death overtook him. And then nothing but a mewing of cats and a scratching at the door, and outside the listener with ear bent to the keyhole. Mr. Egg passed his handkerchief over his forehead. He did not like his thoughts. But he had to go on and see the murderer sliding through the door in the morning, hurrying to collect his innocent accomplices before Mrs. Crabbe should come, knowing that it must be done quickly and the corpse made decent, and that when people came to the house there must be no mysterious mewlings to surprise them. To set the cats free would not be enough. They might hang about the house. No, the water butt, and then the grave in the garden. But Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz, noble Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz, had fought for his life. He wasn't going to be drowned in any water butts. He'd kicked himself loose, and I hope, thought Mr. Egg, he scratched him all to blazes. And he toiled his way home across London. If only Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz could tell what he knew. But Monty Egg knew something, and he could tell. "And I will tell what's more," said Monty Egg to himself as he wrote down the name and address of Mr. Proctor's solicitor. He supposed it must be murder to terrify an old man to death. He wasn't sure, but he meant to find out. He cast about in his mind for a consoling motto from the salesman's handbook, but for the first time in his life could find nothing that really fitted the case. "I seem to have stepped regularly out of my line," he thought sadly. "But still, as a citizen—" And then he smiled, recollecting the first and last aphorism in his favourite book. "To serve the public is the aim of every salesman worth the name."